people in Silicon Valley don't talk about Uber anymore. They talk about Flexport. They talk about the congestion. They're talking about our industry.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to the 167th episode of the Shipping Podcast. If you're here for the first time, I want to make sure that you do not miss out on anything. Follow the Shipping Podcast on your podcast platform of choice and become part of the tribe that gets to listen to new episodes as soon as they are released. I received an email after the release of episode 165 with Frank Coles. It read, "I have not slept all night thinking about this podcast. It is simultaneously the most encouraging and depressing episode I have ever heard to date. Two things. I never expected to be approached by gCaptain. And two, what on earth did he mean? Nevertheless, I was intrigued and wanted to know. So immediately I invited him as a guest to the Shipping Podcast. Here is our conversation. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Captain John Konrad. I am the founder and CEO of gCaptain.com.
And how did you end up in shipping? What is your background?
Well, I grew up with not a lot of money in the Bronx, and the Bronx was burning in the late 70s, early 80s. And my dad was a fireman, and he wanted to get us out and realized education was the way. So we bought the absolute worst teardown house in the wealthiest suburb of New York City. And it was right on the Long Island Sound that I loved. I wanted to sail, and I couldn't. We couldn't afford the yacht club. So my father knocked on doors, found the best sailor, got introduced to Richard DeMolin. He's former chairman of Intertanko, and he taught me how to sail on a sailboat. He was an America's Cup skipper, and that was the bug that got me interested.
What education did you have by then?
I went to SUNY Maritime College, New York Maritime Academy in New York, and I had originally wanted to be in the Navy, and then I found this world of ships, and I graduated from there and worked very briefly on some government Navy ships, and then I moved up to tankers. And, this was in 1999, 2000. There weren't very many U.S. flag ships. I think out of my graduating class, only 12 of us set sail. But I was determined. I first actually backpacked through Europe, and I would call the shipping companies every single day until they would get mad at me. Stop calling us. It was an early, go to the internet cafes. And then I'd send the HR department flowers because no one was getting a job. They wanted you to sail as AB. But one company gave me a chance, and I worked my way up to tankers and then drill ships. The drill ships was interesting because I was really a computer nerd in high school. I was a track runner, cross country, and I was either running or in the computer lab. Didn't have many friends in that time, but my guidance counselor said, "Hey, the computers, there's no future in computers." This was mid-90s. Wow. So I said, okay, I'm going to do the shipping. Sailing, I love that. I'm going to do that. And so, but very few people in shipping, most people, at least in America, get on ships to kind of get away from the technology that's crushing our souls. So I was one of the few. And then I found out the Ambani brothers, who are the wealthiest individuals in India. Back then, they weren't. They had a family textile mill, made color, those bright, beautiful colors for textiles. And they wanted to bring energy independence to India. So they bought this old drill ship, but they needed people who could sail the ship and also run the computers. And so I went on board there and worked my way up on the drill ships, and the Ambani brothers, and they're most famous. They have a mansion in Mumbai. It's a skyscraper. The whole family lives in the skyscraper. That's how much oil and natural gas we found in India. But they were entrepreneurs and encouraged me to move to Silicon Valley, right outside there. So I moved there, and it was right in the early days of Facebook and Twitter. And I became friends with a lot of those guys. I was the first internet influencer. It was a site called dig.com before Read It. And that's one of those small things that we didn't call them. We called them super users then. It wasn't even influencers. And those guys encouraged me first we did ski websites with my brother on official networks. And Lena, right away, within the first year, we raised $6 million and floods of users. And I said, man, this is easy. But then the snow melted in the summer. And I said, hey, I am a licensed ship captain. I want to do this for shipping. And to this day, we haven't raised a penny because the tech guys, in Silicon Valley, the Mark Zuckerbergs and the VCs said, we don't understand shipping. And then I went to the shipping crowd and in Wall Street and Connecticut and Houston, Texas. And they said, well, we like the old magazines. So I bootstrapped it. We split the company. My brother took the skiing. I took the harder route, shipping, and built it up for there. And that was 2006. So it's been a few years now.
So talk to me about gCaptain. What is gCaptain and what do you do?
Well, gCaptain, I started with my wife, Cindy, in 2006. And we two things back then. Now there's a flood of maritime news. There are a million websites and podcasts and everything then. But back then, it was really only Fair Play, Lloyd's List, and TradeWinds. And they cost over $1,000 a year. So as a captain, I didn't have any news or information. So I really wanted to give those digital tools to the sailors was one thing. And we also saw social media and our forum as a way to de-silo the industry. I traveled a lot and I saw that mariners in Sweden and Denmark and England do things different from in France and Singapore. And I thought we could really learn by bringing this community together. So, I really wanted one international platform to really break down those barriers, and not just between nations, but also you'll never see a cruise ship captain at a tanker seminar. You'll never see a tanker captain at a Navy conference, and I think I've mostly failed in that regard, but we were successful beyond our wildest dreams and making the news more democratic and free and just accessible to people.
This sounds like music in my ears, because that is what I felt the first time when I started hanging out with people who knows about online communication. It was like when people ask me, why did you start a shipping podcast? Because I can. So yes. I really get excited about what you're saying. So how big is the gCaptain now then? How many followers do you have, and where can I find it?
gCaptain.com is the main site. And then we have the forum and our social media empire. The biggest is Facebook with 250,000 followers on Facebook.
Wow.
I think our newsletter has 70,000. Twitter's got a lot, and LinkedIn. We're all accessible on that. But people ask me all the time in the early days, when are you going to start a magazine? I said, I would love to start a magazine. It's just expensive, but I don't care the platform. We did podcasts for a number of years, nowhere near as successful as you. I've been a huge fan of yours since day one, because I'd been struggling for 3 years and no one listened to my podcast. And man, I was like, this is the format, but it also, you make it look easy, but I know how difficult it is, right? Getting the microphone and the sound right and everything and the questions. And, I'm a big fan of yours, Lena.
Thank you. So you haven't figured it out yet. I have used the same 5 questions continuously since day one.
Is that the trick?
Yes, that's the trick. But I listen a lot. So the conversations goes on depending on your answers to my questions. But I have had the same question. I even had a PhD who did a survey on this one and did a report on what people replied to my questions. And if there was a difference between men and women and all of that. Interesting stuff. I couldn't even...
What is that?
I couldn't even understand what I had done to her. But I think she found it very, very interesting.
And that's a big part too. I'm the public face of gCaptain, but it was 50% owned by my wife from day one. She was second mate. We went to the same college. We met. She became a second mate. She worked on the oceanographic ships and scripts, and then some container ships overseas. And I've been a big supporter of yours, and particularly Women Offshore and Ali Sedino, and getting all this out, because unfortunately, shipping kind of drove my wife away from shipping and some of the challenges she went through. It's not my story to tell. And, she became a very private person, not because she's afraid of the challenges, but because it's hard to focus on your job and her job as she was CFO of gCaptain and doing all this other, when everyone's constantly bombarding you with questions about being a woman and questioning your abilities. And as you know, so I thank you so much. And I'm really excited that just in the last, people say the future of shipping is so dim. There are all these ESG and, your last guest, Frank Coles, and the Seafarer Prom and all this. And can we get past it? And I'm an eternal optimist, but also I've seen the darkest days 10 years ago. I didn't think we'd be able to get any more women on ships and tackle any of these issues. And, women in the community have really come together, and podcasts like yours and mentorship programs like Women Offshore and WISTA. And there are huge, huge changes. And I think we know what we need to do. We just got to copy that and paste it into seafarers' rights and ESG and these other issues, right?
Yep. I'm happy that you recognize that, because, we are a force to reckon with, the women in the maritime industry.
Absolutely.
And all we want is to find people who want to continue working with us and move forward. And I think that is the bottom line here. I didn't think I was going to be able to have 50% women and 50% men as guests on my podcast when I started, but that was a goal of mine. Because I think there are so many interesting people. It doesn't really matter if there are men or women, but usually you see or hear almost only about the men, which is in a way, there are so many people at the sea level that are mainly men. So, of course, it's interesting to talk to them and talk about them and whatever. But the women, my God, you walk into a room filled with power women and you feel so empowered yourself. I've done that a few times, and it's amazing.
Well, you can't make it in this industry unless, as a woman, and get to that high level, unless you have huge amounts of passion, right? So you have these women that have been beat down so many times, and I don't think the men. I didn't realize it as a captain how bad it was, but and things like harassment. They say statistics over 50% of women face harassment or rape on board ship. I think I'm confident it's above 90%, Lena, because once you start talking to these women on ships, they all have a story, and they're battling so much I'm going to start tearing up.
Well, I totally agree. And when you want to talk about it, people have a tendency that they don't want to talk about problems. And I mean, if we don't acknowledge the problems we have, we can't do anything about them. That is my view of things.
Right.
And one of the reasons why I invited you to my podcast is that I received a message from you where you said, Lena, I've been listening to your podcast with Frank Coles. The number is 165.
Yes.
And I haven't slept all night because I think it's the most encouraging and also the most depressing episode I've ever heard. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, we've gone into the shipping world of niceness. Everyone's got to be nice, and everything's got to be run through HR and particularly the PR mechanisms. When I started gCaptain, we had a goal of, we knew Lloyd's List would not be able to, the longest running continuous print magazine in the history of the world. And we were like, we're going to shut down those presses because everything's behind a paywall, and they're not tackling the hard stories. And we're given awards. You go to any shipping company award ceremony, it's the same guys who have gotten 6 awards, and they pass it around and they raise money for these seafarer charities. And it's all nice and good. And I'm not saying there's some great PR and we need PR, but we also need to tell the truth. I mean, we have the IMO's done a wonderful job in these women ambassadors, and I so promote the program, but we also have to tell the women who go out to sea, and there's a new flood of them. Well, here's what you have to expect. Do you know, if a woman is raped on a U.S. flagship, and we have some of the strongest, laws in the country, that the captain, if he reports it, most captains who have reported have been fired or laid off. And if he doesn't report it, the max fine from the Coast Guard is $5,000. That's a full rape. So, and no one wants to talk about it because it's not nice, right? The whistleblowing is not nice. I worked on drill ships. I left because we had fires a year before the Deepwater Horizon, and I wrote the book on the Deepwater Horizon, and that wasn't nice. A lot of these things today are not nice. Some of the pollution in the environment, I'm a huge fan of Greta over in Sweden, that just saying things that people do not want to hear, telling them, you should feel shame. And it's challenging because how do you balance that? I feel gCaptain, I'm a super optimist, and you are too. And we got to advocate. We got to show people how great the industry, how much potential it has to reduce carbon if we rely more on ships, how strong women are, and diversity, and not just talking about women, minorities in this is a whole nother issue that came out with I mean, how many black, you were asking potential guests a few months ago, and I said, let's get a black executive up there. And there are very, very few, some in the cruise lines, but when someone gets an executive job, there'll be the flood of PR saying that they support this, but there's nothing critical. No one's going out. And Frank Coles came right out and said, hey, seafarers got to strike. And I don't know if that's the right answer or not, but Lena, we had journalists, every New York Times, Washington Post, San Francisco Chronicle, they all, Financial Times in London, had a maritime journalist who went down to the docks and talked to the captains and found out seafarers' rights. And then when Craigslist came and evaporated the profit of all these big companies, they let go of their maritime reporters. And then organizations like gCaptain and your podcasts have come in. But to be honest, there's not a lot of funding in this. And numerous times when we're critical of a particular company or a particular classification society or something like that, who are doing great work in one end, but there may be something particular where people are dying or raped, and they want us to promote all the good things, and we're happy. But second, we start reporting on the bad things, we lose advertising contracts. And, the money, I mean, Lloyd's List, think of Lloyd's List had a whole building in London at their prime. And now gCaptain is run by a handful of people, and you're doing these podcasts by yourself. And I think that Ali Sedino, Woman Offshore, has too.
Out of pocket. I mean, I do this out of my own pocket. So, yeah.
So we talked about Maersk, and I had an article about Maersk. $40 billion last year in revenue, $40 billion, and they just quadrupled freight rates this year. And a few $1,000s advertising, and they wonder, one of the Maersk executives called me, and why are you so frustrated? And I say, Maersk, behind the Ever Given, was a Maersk ship that saved the life and all this pileup, and they refused to let the captain talk to the media. And the captain didn't want to talk to the media because when the captain talks to media, if he missteps, he's likely to get fired. These are the realities of, whistleblowers are treated terribly. Women who are raped are treated terribly. Minorities who can't get advanced are treated terribly. And there's no journalists exposing these stories. And there's no funding.
And there was a time there when we all looked up to Jonathan Richmond at Maersk, because he knew what it was all about and how to play the social media.
Jonathan's great. And when the Triple E's came out, he flew gCaptain over there and hands-on tour. And we crawled through the ship and access to the captains. And yeah, it was, Jonathan knows what's going on, but who else is like Jonathan out there? And everyone's scared of the media. But also look at Congress and the EU, right? People have kind of dismissed America. But most of the flags of convenience, the top 3 are on American soil. They're run by former Coast Guard guys. And, the guy, IMO, has a number of Coast Guard guys, and you have Biden trying to push this climate change and everything else, but has no interest in maritime affairs here. And there's very little work between the European and the American communities. Right now, 10 years ago, America was number 10 in terms of ship finance. Now, because the hedge funds and Wall Street profits, we're number 1. The technology's out there. Jeff Bezos is a ship owner. Elon Musk is a ship owner for their rockets. Eric Schmidt's a ship owner. But no one's coming over here. And those small companies like gCaptain and the small American companies don't necessarily have the budgets to be flying over to Europe all the time. So it all ties together, but all the money is going into PR and niceness, and it's not going into sitting in a room and hammering out the uncomfortable truths. And that's what I want to get, the uncomfortable truths. And you do it with your podcast. And I think that's why you're popular. gCaptain is by far the most visited. I'm 30 million page views last year. And I don't say this to boost myself, but we have so many more page views than the next competitor. And it's because not all the time, it's hard to do. We don't have the journalists, we don't have the budget, but we try to tackle those hard things. And there's a real appetite for it because people want the truth. They want to fix things.
Mm. I have most listeners in the United States, and they are New York, Washington, and Silicon Valley.
Wow. That's impressive.
Yeah, and I think maybe the Silicon Valley people want to know our flaws, because then there is a business opportunity.
Well, there's huge profit. Like I said, 15 years ago, we started gCaptain, $6 million for unofficial networks or ski, not a penny for gCaptain. And the VCs, I know all of them. One of my best friends is chief operating officer of Facebook before, Sheryl Sandberg. Introduced all the VCs. They closed the door. But then Flexport came out, and Flexport is logistics. And they was started in New York City and Columbia as a shipping company to track shipping containers. And they got no traction with the VCs. And then someone said, hey, get rid of your shipping cabins, go to rebrand yourselves as logistics. And they raised money. And now they just raised $1 billion from SoftBank. I mean, people in Silicon Valley don't talk about Uber anymore. They talk about Flexport. They talk about the congestion. They're talking about our industry. So then I love that you had Marina on 2 episodes again, because I feel like she's, got her fingers in the dike that's collapsing and trying this up. But now I get all these invites from the VCs, but I go in and I talk to them for hours, and I bring in someone like I'm working with a few MIT startups. I'm on the board of Mass Challenge, and I bring these guys in, and it's hours of questions. And then they say, well, we don't have the confidence. It's not your fault. It's ours. We don't have the expertise to invest in shipping. So we're back 15 years ago, but now there's the desire. They had no desire because they thought shipping was dirty. Now they really want to invest, but they need their hands held, and it's difficult.
Yeah, but I also see from the other end that at the beginning, the shipping industry were more like, no, we don't need startups. We know everything. We know everything in our technical departments. And when I started questioning that and say, why do you think that Apple has grown so much, or Google? Do you think that they have technical departments that knows everything? Then they were a bit mad with me, I can say. And then I could see that the shipping companies, after a while, they started buying startups who were starting to analyze data in the maritime industry. But then they bought a small startup, and still they didn't know themselves within the company what they were doing. They were just following. Now I see a trend that the shipping companies are hiring the technical people to do the work for them. So they have it's gone to the sea level that they need to understand all of this. And I'm not talking just about the very big ones. I'm talking about middle size or a little bit. Yeah. So there has been a change within the maritime industry as well when it comes to technical developments and how it all used to be, and everyone held their cards to their chest and were very, secretive about what they were doing. There is no such place anymore as being secretive in the same way as it was in the old days. Yeah?
No, you have to be out there. In 2005, when I was in Silicon Valley, you went to a coffee shop and there was Zuckerberg. Elon Musk was sitting right there. You could go down and say, "Hey, what's up?" and ask questions, and I did. And that's the thing, with podcasts, everyone's, how did you come up with this idea of gCaptain? It's nothing new. I stole it from Silicon Valley. I stole the idea and I just moved it on to shipping. But the big shipping companies, we can go, I've been giving Maersk hell. And I want to say, particularly, I've written articles lately about Maersk because they are the best in our industry, right? And everyone knows them and they do such a good job. So if they're failing, everyone else is automatically failing. But look at the debacle with TradeLens and IBM. I mean, it fell apart trying to do blockchain because they tried to just throw money at it. And it's not, it's about passion in the small guys and investing in those passionate people in very small teams. It's not a problem you can throw money at. Sexual harassment. See, right now, no one knows this, but there's a Maersk captain on trial in the Coast Guard right now for harassment issues. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but these are the stories how many articles have you read about TradeLens and no one's willing to say it's failed? And the Maersk internal people have come to that conclusion. And you read all about this in Ali Sedino's podcast of all the sexual harassment. I think there's some European women who are finally coming out and saying this. But meanwhile, Maersk captain is on trial right now and it's not getting out in the news. It's really, everything gets brushed under the rug. And that makes me sad, Leni.
Yeah, so that part of it's still there, the non-transparency. But it has to become transparent. The entire industry has to. I mean, we got the ESG coming up, as I have. I had Valentina on my podcast a couple of episodes ago. It's amazing. There's so many things you have to tell about. Yeah.
I loved her and all she said.
I totally agree. I was amazed when I listened to her as well. But you also listened to my episode with the two captains. I had two captains. It was Captain Kate and Captain Thomas. And I was so blown away myself. I was starstruck, of course, because those two are the role models and the spokesperson for our industry, for the young people at least, and maybe also outside our industry, because I want to reach outside our industry, which is a little bit different maybe from you. I don't know, but I'm trying to promote our industry to people outside to know this is so cool. I wish someone told me when I was younger that this was so cool. It could become so many different things in the maritime industry. But Captain Kate and Captain Thomas, they had never met because one is a captain on a container vessel and the other one is a captain on a cruise ship. So then again, there you got the silos.
I love them. And my daughter, she's 13. She had no interest in shipping until Captain Kate came out, and Captain Thomas. gCaptain's been promoting gay rights and minorities for 10 years. My wife's brother is gay, and it was a huge. And look how much change we've gotten. Lena, when I was joined the Merchant Marine, I had to join the Navy originally 15 years ago, and there was division of naval police who would arrest you. They would go to parties and look for a guy kissing a guy and you would arrest you. And now we have board member, captain of, and that's the thing too, it's not just the bad stories, but this Maersk ship behind the Ever Given where he did a great job. Captain Thomas and Captain Kate, we have to support them. And you look at, people think, wow, they got amazing Instagram followers. And I don't know how many does Captain Kate have now?
I think it's 250,000, so maybe you are competing.
250,000. But she also, Norwegian Cruise Line gives her support and helps her. Maersk helps promote. There's real money behind these guys. gCaptain, we got to 250,000 Facebook because we're buying Facebook ads. This advertising works. You talked about Coca-Cola and Apple. I talk to the U.S. Coast Guard all the time. And I was like, you have so many programs for diversity of women. Why don't you advertise them? And they say, we have the big orange bird that rescues people and gets headline news. Mm-hmm. And I say, well, Coca-Cola's got the big red machine in every gym and Apple's got the big black phone in everyone's pocket, yet they're still spending billions on advertising. There are 1 million Instagram influencers who have over 1 million followers. So I don't know where Captain Kate is in the ranking, but she's not in the top 1 million. And it's because, so let's get together as the publishers and help. I wrote an article about her yesterday. We need to give, and I'm not saying just cash, but we have to play the game better of Instagram and get, Sanjay Gupta from CNN's on her ship right now. That's what we need. What's her increase in Instagram followers after that? It would be huge. It would be huge. And these are the things that, again, I gave Maersk a hard time. I love them. And they've pioneered this with Jonathan and the Lego ships, but they have to do more. And if they have to do more, so does everyone else. They made $40 billion in revenue last year. And how much did they really spend on their helping, Thomas? And that little amount they put in has inspired so many gay and lesbians, trans people into our industry. That tiny, tiny investment is making such an impact. The tiny investment, and it's minuscule for Captain Kate, it's got my daughter interested in shipping. Imagine if we had 1/40 of Maersk's revenue pour at this, which would be $1 billion. And the thing, we don't need that much. We just need the companies to support. I'm not talking about us. They need to advertise on the shipping podcast. They need to advertise on Women Offshore and Splash. And I'll name all the competitors, Maritime Executive and Tradewinds. People, and there are a lot of bad magazines out there too, who just publish press releases, but who's in the arena, who's telling the truth? That's why people love. It's brave of Captain Thomas.
Yeah.
15 years ago, you get arrested for that, and now he's standing in front of a rainbow container. That's brave, and we can't forget that.
He's got a lot of headache as well, because there are so many fake Captain Thomas nowadays. So there is a backside of everything.
Yes,
of course. But I agree with you. And for a while there, when social media started, I think the big ones realized that they needed to have some social media manager or something. But they continued just to talk about themselves. So it's a one-way communication. It's not the debate, the discussion, the dialogue that we need to have, because the young people are listening to that. I get so many mails and messages through different channels from young people, and they say, wow, I didn't know that there was such a big maritime world out there, that I could do different things. So right now I'm maybe on board a ship or maybe working in a port, but I didn't know that I could become something else bigger and better, because we are going to need the best people, the young people, to develop our industry as well. So we need to tell them. We need to tell the politicians that we are important. It's all about it's shipping, and it's the ocean, it's the water, it's sustainability, it's everything. And then we need the young people to come and work for us.
And we have to give them a voice like Greta.
But who is taking that? Yeah, but who's taking that responsibility? There's so many people who I think is paid to do that, but they don't. They go and hire a PR company to do it for them, and then it's all over in a second.
Right. When my book, I get $10,000 speaking engagements for my book. No one pays me to speak about it. You should be at every conference. If someone's starting a conference, they should be paying you a speaking fee, hotels and flights, and get out there and get the word out. Because you're right, these young people is what it's about, and they have a very high BS filter, right?
Yeah.
They just ignore this other stuff, and they want to speak the truth. Let them talk, and then listen, and let's change the world.
Yeah.
So who do you think? Is it just a money problem? Am I too American? That's the focus. What John, you just keep talking about. We got to throw more money on it, but is that American point of view?
No.
What's your thoughts, Lena?
I think you have realized what I have realized, that there is a different way. If everything else is changing in the maritime industry, so must the trade press and the people inside reporting on what's happening inside. But also we need to think about, how are we perceived from the other end? What are people seeing when they look at us? I mean, both investors, but also young people who we want to come and work for us. And I mean, so there is a problem in that. We have been talking about a fair future for the seafarers. at the same time when we are reporting about the bad stuff. So it gets confusing for everyone outside. And I think we should report on the crew crisis and everything else that isn't happening. But to me, it's like connecting the dots. We do not get heard by the states, the heads of state, because we didn't do our homework. We didn't tell them how important we are and what cool things we do and all of that, and how we can contribute to a society, more sustainable society. We haven't told them that. But still, we are waiting for them to listen to us. And then, on top of that, it's not the heads of states that is actually dealing with a small thing like maritime industries, usually the transport minister or minister of infrastructure or something like that. And they've got other things on their mind. And everyone closes their board because it's me all over the place now due to the pandemic. And I connect the dots like, we didn't tell them on beforehand how important we are and how we can contribute. So why should they listen to us now? And that is why I think that Frank Coles was right when he was talking about we need to stand up. I think we have different ways that we think it should be done. I don't agree with I agree with you and him that there is a need for a strike, but maybe that is the wrong way to do it.
Or a voice, look at the multicultural and the colors and the ethnicities and of the people, and then walk into a shipping conference in Houston, Texas, or in London, and that's not represented, right? We're one of the most diverse, ethnically multicultural industries in the entire world, and I'm not sure those people have a voice.
When you were talking about the Black voices in our industry, I attended, Vista International had the AGM on board a ship, one of the Holland America lines. Mm-hmm. 5 years ago, I think. We were in the United States. We went from Fort Lauderdale. And we were, of course, listening to Orlando. I can't really remember his surname. I'm sorry about that. But he just stood there and he said, I know exactly what you're talking about. You are a minority and you know what you want. I'm Black. I know exactly what you're talking about. That was so powerful.
Yeah, Orlando Ashford. That's it's not just we need. Look, the big tech companies now, if the top 5 companies control 25% of the stock market wealth, and you ask them, and it's because they invest in diversity, they invest in the journalism and uncovering these stories. They're opening centers at Black colleges and women's colleges, and it takes an investment.
Yeah.
But the rewards, I mean, the rewards that multicultural view unlocks in a company, people demanding higher ESG values and demanding culture and just seeing things differently. It's proven. That's what frustrates me. These companies, everyone's frustrated. How does Apple and Microsoft, how do they control so much of the wealth? It's because they put money in diversity. If you ask them, that's what they tell you.
I'm so happy to speak to you. No one else understands me, I think. I have seen this. And as you said, I also copied someone else. I knew that this was going to work. A podcast was going to work in one way or the other. I have developed it myself. But of course, I've copied it from someone else. And I see what all other industries are doing. And I think, why on earth can't we do the same? Because we are so much more interesting than the other ones. And we are all so passionate. Yeah.
And important. Look, and during COVID, everything shut down. The airlines shut down, the taxis shut down, the trucks shut down. They didn't shut down the ships, at least not in the US. They kept, because of the importance. And, that's what Frank, if we strike, they're going to quickly see the importance, but they're waking up now, right? And so we got to remind these legislators too. It's passionate, it's interesting, it's beautiful. I miss the sea every day. I'm not out there, but also important, right? Important for the future of the climate change. Important for all these ESG initiatives. I mean, I think it's important, and I think what you're doing is important and needs more support.
Thank you. I agree with that one. So how do you see the future for the maritime industry? What is in your crystal ball?
Well, I told you I'm an optimist, which everyone thinks is a happy, but you end up being depressed because things don't, 15. If you told me 15 years ago, gCaptain would be the largest news entity in the world, maritime, I would have said, no way, shocked. But then I would have also thought, wow, I'll probably be driving a Ferrari, right? It's a struggle every day. But I mean, the young people give me hope. The diversity and getting out there, the message, and the fact that the message is from a captain, right? That's huge too. Captain Kate, Captain Thomas, people who have been out there, the men and women in the arena. But, at the end of the day, it's going to be Valentina and Marina. It's going to be, if we don't do it ourselves, Amazon and the venture capitalists are going to do it for us, and the ship owners are going to be out of business because Amazon, look, Home Depot just bought its own ship, and right now they do it for this reason and that reason. But when they start to see the profit potential, when they start to see the missed opportunity, when they start to see all the low-hanging fruit that no one's captured, when they start to say, listen to your podcast and all the opportunity in shipping, I think they're going to buy more ships, and the ship owners who don't are going to lose out. I mean, these companies have wealth and they're pushing diversity. They're pushing climate change. The Shell Deloitte study says 200 billion is ready to unlock now if we can solve the IMO 2030 issues. And people like Valentina are going to walk into IMO and MARAD, and they're going to demand that the CEO of Maersk, Soren, and the CEO of MSC visits the White House. I mean, the Maritime Administration in the U.S., I don't know when a European CEO has been there the last time. I was talking to them yesterday. They've never seen the CEO of Maersk. I hope he's been to the EU. And then the Navy, that's a whole nother topic, has this immense amount of power. The NATO Navy and the U.S. Navy, for climate change, they can push it, and they're using biodiesels. And they're the most powerful and well-monetized shipping company in the world. But again, we don't mix, right? Cruise and... So we got all the pieces, like we got the cruise ship and Captain Kate and Maersk, we got the thing, and the Navy's got some of the biodiesel and they put money in, and we got all these pieces together, and Wall Street's got the ESG funding, but we need one person to bring these together, and it can't be a PR exercise. We got to know the real problems and admit our faults and say we're sorry, or it doesn't even have to be an apology, but we have to say we messed up here. And that's the role of the journalists, I think. And so I don't know who's going to bring these entities together. That's what we need.
Amen.
But if we don't do it, Valentina's going to do it because she's a powerful, strong woman who's on a mission, and she's not going to let shipping executives stop her. And people like me and many others are going to fully back her.
I think there are so many great initiatives going on behind closed doors, maybe. But I think there's so many good things happening, but they don't realize the power of maybe talking about it in a different way and encouraging people. Because I see so many technical things, and for sustainability, so many people says, well, the technology is already there. It's just a matter of, walking the talk. And I think maybe they don't know where to talk about it and how to talk about it. If they did, there would be a different song all over again, I think.
But look, if Soren, the CEO, and I hate to go back to Maersk, if he went and knocked on, right now they're blowing horns for the day of the seafarer all over. They're in the middle of the ocean. No one can hear it. They're waking up the night crew. This is obviously not a campaign that a ship captain would come up with, like me. It's a campaign that some PR or HR person came up with, and think it's support. But if that CEO of Maersk and MSC and went to outside the White House and put a horn and sounded that at noon, that would make a difference. If they visited MARAD, we need these top people. When was the last time you see the CEO of Maersk or one of these others at IMO working through a committee meeting, right? They have immense, this is the thing, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars were spent to expand the ports for these mega ships that benefit maybe 4 or 5 companies. I mean, as a New York taxpayer. The Bayonne Bridge was $1.4 billion. The dredging in the New York Canal was $1 billion. And they're just dropping all these containers on the poor city, Newark, in my state. And so Biden right now can't get the transportation bill, infrastructure bill. He can't raise a bridge, but Maersk did it. So they tell me we don't have the political power or influence. And I say, well, then how did you get the Bayonne Bridge raised? How did you get billions for these super ships and new cranes and ports around the world? They have the influence, but they've rolled up their sleeves. They visited. The CEO went to the port of New York. They went to legislature. We got to bring that on a global scale. They got to sit down at IMO and give honest interviews and go to the White House and blow the whistle there, not in the middle of the ocean.
So you think that the current CEOs of the world should be our spokesperson?
Well, we don't have a leader, right? Every industry has a leader. I was just talking to a good buddy, Thad Allen was posting. He was the commandant of the Coast Guard with Captain Sullenberg. He's getting appointed by Biden for the IMO of the aviation. I mean, the aviator has a leader. Captain Sully is a leader. We had Captain Phillips, but no one's inviting him to speak anymore. It's kind of been forgotten. He's been pushed aside. So there's a clear AB representative. You look at the FAA in the United States, that's run by a pilot, and the UN body is run by a pilot. You look at NASA and the European NASA, they're both run by astronauts. You look at the Federal Drug Administration and the the Surgeon General in the US, it's doctors. We don't have captains in these positions. But really, we don't have a leader, right? Every industry has that one recognizable name that everyone knows. We don't have that for the shipping industry. We don't have someone standing up and speaking the truth. I think there's a huge leadership vacuum right now. And it's not all their fault. We went through a 15-year cycle of destruction in the maritime world and super thin profits and everything else. But I think it's important to speak now because Maersk is making more money than ever, and they just quadrupled profits, and we can't build new ships because the IMO, and that's going to hurt their bottom line. So right now, the stars are aligning. ESG and profits and diversity are all lining in, but we need the leader who's willing to step up and speak the truth, I think.
And coming out of the pandemic, it's going to be a new way of working.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a lot of new things. It's going to be a new normal, which is also something to add to those things that are in line right now.
Hopefully a flood of people who now download your podcast because the digitalization is important.
I agree. Thank you, John, for taking the time to talk to me. We could go on and on and on. And if we get the request, maybe we can come back and do part 2. I don't know. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me.
I'm honored. This is the greatest honor in the last 5 years. Thank you, Lena. I'm real excited to be here.
Thank you, John. Finally, I have found someone who understands what I'm trying to do with my podcast. There is another way of doing things. Other industries are ahead of us and have tried things out. We do not need to invent the wheel. We just need to update it and make it maritime. During the spring, I have been approached by companies that want to collaborate with me. We are now looking at starting this collaboration after the summer. It means that some episodes will be sponsored by a specific company. But it also means that we will develop this platform, which I have built for the last 6 years, into something more. If you want to come along for that journey, and you think your company wants to collaborate, please email me at hello@shippingpodcast.com. Thank you for being such a great and loyal audience. I am doing this for you, and you give me so much energy to continue my work propagating for the change of the maritime industry, the best industry in the world. Until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.